Okay, think about just how much digital stuff, you create every single day. We're talking photos, documents, emails. It just keeps piling up.
It really does. And keeping all that safe, that's becoming absolutely crucial.
Exactly. So let's unpack this a bit. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something called Purpose-Built Backup Appliances, or PBBAs.
Right. These are basically specialized systems, hardware and software combined, designed for one main job,
Yeah.
protecting all that valuable digital information.
And we've got this really comprehensive report to work from. It zooms right in on the global market for these PBBAs.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to get beyond just the surface level numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We want to understand the trends, who the key companies are, and where this whole vital area of data protection is actually heading.
For sure. We're looking at things like market size predictions, growth rates, and some of these are pretty eye-opening, actually, how different regions stack up, the major players.
And maybe most importantly, what's actually pushing this market forward and what hurdles it might be facing.
Right. Think of this as your shortcut to getting a really solid handle on the present and the future of data backup tech.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture. What's the global market actually worth right now, or say for 2025?
Okay, so digging into the report for 2025, the estimate for the global PBBA market is pretty substantial. USD 900,640.0 million.
9.6 billion. Wow. Okay. And that's just a starting point, right? What's the growth look like?
Oh yeah, it's definitely not stopping there. The forecast shows some serious upward momentum. By 2033, it's projected to hit, get this, USD 226.13 million.
22 billion. That's more than double.
Exactly. And here's the really interesting part for me. That works out to a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 10.90% between 2025 and 2033.
10.9%. That's really strong, sustained growth for this sector.
It really is. It shows how important this technology is becoming.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the global view. Let's maybe drill down a bit. How does this break down by region? Who's leading the charge?
Well, right now, North America is definitely out in front. For 2025, they're holding something like over 40% of the global revenue.
40%, okay.
Yeah, that translates to a market size of USD 2,795.60 million for them in 2025. And they're still growing pretty steadily, projected at a 9.3% CAGR through 2033.
That's a huge slice of the pie. Can we break down North America a bit more, like U.S. versus Canada?
Sure. The U.S. market, unsurprisingly, is the biggest chunk. In 2025, it's estimated at USD 205.73 million, growing at about 9.1% CAGR. The report highlights, growing data security concerns as a big driver there.
Makes sense. And Canada.
Canada's market in 2025 is around USD 335.47 million. Interestingly, their projected CAGR is a bit higher, 10.1%. The drivers mentioned are rising cybersecurity worries and just general demand for better data protection.
Okay. And Mexico?
Mexico comes in at USD 254.40 million for 2025. With a projected CAGR of 9.8%. So solid growth there, too.
All right, so North America is dominant currently. What about across the pond in Europe? How are things looking there?
Europe's also a really significant player. They hold over 30% of the global market share in 2025.
30%, okay.
Yeah, that puts their market size at USD 2313.6 million. And their projecting growth is pretty solid, too, a 9.4% CAGR up to 2033. But Europe is quite diverse, as you'd expect.
Right, so which countries are the main contributors within that 30%?
Well, let's see. The UK market in 2025 is pegged at USD 388.68 million, and they have a strong CI forecast of 10.2%. The report links that to strong cybersecurity measures being put in place.
Interesting.
Then Germany is actually even larger, USD 458.09 million in 2025, with a 9.6% CAGR.
Yeah.
That's likely boosted by their, strict ADA regulations.
Oh, that tracks.
France is at USD 212.85 million, 8.6% CAGR. Russia's quite large too, USD 358.61 million, though a slightly lower CAGR at 8.4%.
Right.
Let's see, Sweden, USD 71.72 million, 9.5%. Denmark, USD 48.59 million, 9.2%. Switzerland, USD 34.70 million, 9.0%. Even Luxembourg is on the list, USD 27.76 million, but a pretty high 9.7% CAGR.
Wow, that's quite a list.
Yeah, and the rest of Europe combined adds another USD 323.90 million, growing at about 8.1%. So a very distributed but significant market.
That gives a really good feel for the European landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, you mentioned some growth rates were eye-opening. Where are we seeing the fastest growth?
Ah, right. That would be Asia Pacific, APAC. That's where things are really heating up.
Okay.
So in 2025, they hold around 23% of the global market share, which is about USD 300 and 566.80 million. But the key figure here is their projected CAGR to 2033. It's a really impressive 12.8%.
12.8%. That's significantly higher than North America and Europe. What's fueling that kind of acceleration in APAC?
Well, the report points squarely at the rapid pace of digital transformation happening across that region. Just think about how quickly many APAC economies are adopting new tech, building out digital infrastructure.
Right. Everything's moving online so fast.
Exactly. And that, combined with naturally growing concerns about cybersecurity as more and more data goes digital, is creating this huge demand for solid backup solutions.
Makes perfect sense. Can we look at some key countries there?
Absolutely. China is the heavyweight in APAC, no surprise. Their market is estimated at USD 1,498.06 million in 2025, with a strong 12.3% CAGR, driven by data security needs and their massive digital economy.
Yes.
Japan's market is significant too, USD 492.22 million, growing at 11.3%. South Korea is at USD 428.02 million with an 11.9% CAGR.
Solid numbers.
But check this out. India, their 2025 market size is USD 356.68 million, but their projected CAGR is a staggering 14.7%.
14.7. Wow.
Yeah, fueled by that rapid digital transformation and just the sheer scale of their expanding digital footprint. Then you have Australia, also strong growth, USD 185.47 million, 12.1% CAGR. Taiwan, USD 139.1 million, 12.6% CAGR. Southeast Asia as a whole, USD 235.41 million, growing at 13.6%. The rest of APAC adds another USD 160.51 million at 12.6% CAGR.
It's really clear that the momentum is definitely shifting towards Asia-Pacific. That's the region to watch.
Without a doubt.
Okay, so we've covered the big three regions. What about the rest of the world?
Yeah.
South America, Middle East, Africa.
Yep, they're smaller shares, but still growing. South America accounts for just over 5% of the global share. That's about USD 366.32 million in 2025, with an 11.3% CAGR overall.
And within South America?
Brazil's largest market there, USD 156.78 million, growing at 11.9%. Argentina is next, USD 61.54 million, but with a strong 12.2% CAGR.
Okay. Middle East.
The Middle East holds around 2% share, roughly USD 385.60 million in 2025, growing at 11.4%. Key players there are Saudi Arabia USD 133.73 million, 11.7% CAGR, and the USD 212.08 million in 2025, with a 10.6% CAGR. Nigeria is listed at USD 16.97 million, growing at 10.8%, and South Africa at USD 74.65 million, with an 11.5% CAGR.
So growth across the board, really.
Okay, that gives us a fantastic global map of the market. Now let's shift gears a bit. What's actually driving all this growth we're seeing? What are the engines? Right. There are a few key things pushing this forward. Number one is definitely the huge increase in adoption of cloud services and also what people call hybrid IT environments.
Hybrid IT, meaning a mix of on-premise and cloud stuff.
Exactly. Companies are using their own data centers and public clouds. That mix makes things more complex, right? So you need really robust, comprehensive backup strategies to cover everything.
That makes sense. More complexity, more need for specialized tools.
Precisely. And as more data ends up in different places, protecting it gets trickier, which boosts demand for these PBBAs. You know, we saw Commvault recently launched their Commvault Cloud powered by Metallic AI.
Yeah.
That really shows the industry focus on cyber resilience in these complicated setups.
Good example. Okay, what else is driving growth?
Secondly, there's just, well, a growing awareness, a much needed awareness, I'd say, of how critical data security is, protecting against cyber attacks, ransomware, data breaches.
We hear about it constantly.
Exactly. Businesses are finally realizing, maybe the hard way sometimes, that they absolutely need to invest in dedicated backup appliances. It's about safeguarding their information, ensuring they can keep operating if something bad happens.
This continuity, yeah.
And thirdly, the technology itself is getting better. These backup solutions are becoming more efficient, more reliable, easier to use. That encourages more companies to adopt them.
So strong drivers, but it can't all be smooth sailing. Are there any, headwinds, factors holding the market back a bit?
Yeah, there are a few things acting as potential brakes. One is definitely the initial cost. Deploying these purpose-built appliances can require a significant upfront investment.
Which can be tough, especially for smaller companies.
Right, exactly. For SMEs with tighter budgets, that initial outlay can be a hurdle. Also related to that, there's still maybe a lack of full awareness among some SMEs about the specific benefits these appliances offer compared to, say, simpler backup methods.
So cost and awareness for SMEs.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, there are also lingering concerns about data privacy and security, particularly when using third-party cloud backup services. Some organizations are still a bit hesitant to hand over all their data, which might slow down the move to purely cloud-based backup for some.
Interesting. So even though cloud adoption is a driver, those privacy worries are still a factor moderating that specific part of the market.
Okay.
Looking forward now, what are some of the key trends shaping this PBBA market?
Okay, trends. One big one is definitely increasing automation in backup processes.
Makes sense? Less manual work, fewer errors.
Precisely. Businesses want to cut down on human error, reduce operational costs. Automated backups are more reliable, more consistent, and need less hands-on attention.
What else is trending?
Another really important one is the rise of subscription-based pricing models.
Ah, like SaaS, but for backup appliances.
Kind of, yeah. It offers more flexibility, lowers that big upfront cost we just talked about. This makes these advanced solutions much more accessible, particularly for those SMEs.
That's a pattern we see everywhere in tech now. Any other key trends?
We're also seeing a growing preference for software-defined storage, or SDS, within these backup appliances.
Meaning more flexibility in how storage is managed.
Basically, yeah. The storage capabilities are more adaptable, scalable, controlled more by software logic than just the physical hardware limits. And maybe the most critical trend right now.
Let me guess. Ransomware.
You got it. There's a massive increasing focus on building ransomware protection right into the design and function of these appliances.
It has to be top of mind.
Absolutely. We saw, for instance, Slide launch back in February 2025 that's specifically a security-first BCDR solution aimed at managed service providers. And look at Object Terabases. First, their rapid growth is all about providing ransomware-proof backup storage initially focused on Veeam users. It really highlights how central this threat has become.
Definitely a major focus. Now, the report also mentioned something about trade tariffs impacting the market. That sounds like an external curveball.
Yeah, it really is. It's an important factor shaking things up. The report specifically calls out the Liberation Day tariffs that the U.S. introduced in 2025.
Okay.
These tariffs, they vary a lot, from 10% up to 145%, depending on the country and the sector. They've definitely hit the electronics industry.
And that includes components for PBBAs, right?
Exactly. Things like semiconductors, batteries, other electronic parts. The ongoing trade situation, especially between the U.S. and China, is a big part of this. Tariffs on some Chinese electronic goods have gone really high.
Like how high?
Well, the report gives examples like 25% on certain semiconductors, 20% on lithium-ion batteries, maybe 10–15% on some finished consumer electronics.
Those are not small percentages.
Yeah.
How does that affect the PBBA makers and buyers?
It causes ripples. First, it disrupts the supply chains for these components. That increases costs for the manufacturers making the PBBAs.
Which they might pass on to customers.
Potentially, yeah, or it squeezes their margins. It's also pushing companies to look for alternative suppliers, maybe outside of China, or even to redesign their products to use components that aren't hit as hard by the tariffs.
So more complex supply chain management.
Definitely. And it's tricky because despite the tariffs, China is still a huge exporter of electronics to the U.S. So companies are really navigating this shifting landscape. The report actually stresses how crucial good market research is now finding new suppliers, figuring out how to optimize product design around these cost pressures.
Businesses need to be really agile then. Okay, let's shift focus again. Who are the actual companies competing in this space? What does the competitive landscape look like?
It's kind of a mix, really. You've got the big established tech giants, think Dell, HPE, IBM. They've been in the storage and data protection game for a long time.
Usual suspects.
Right. But you also have emerging companies, more specialized players offering perhaps more niche or innovative solutions. And even the big guys are innovating, like Infinidat launched their next-gen InfiniBox G4 arrays back in May 2024, and they really emphasize the enhanced cybersecurity features. Shows everyone's adapting.
So who does the report list as the top players in terms of market share? Not necessarily rank, but who's considered major?
Okay, the list includes Dell, NetApp, IBM, Oracle, Fujitsu, Commvault Systems, Veritas Technologies, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE, Quantum, Barracuda Networks, Hitachi Vantara, and ArcServe.
That's a solid list. A mix of hardware-focused, software-focused, and integrated appliance vendors.
Exactly. It's a pretty competitive field.
Okay, good to know who the main players are. Finally, let's look at how the market breaks down internally. What are the key segments the report looks at?
Sure. So one way to slice it is by deployment type. How are these things actually being used?
Okay.
Right now, on-premise solutions where the appliance sits in the company's own data center still hold the major share. That's often driven by organizations needing tight security, compliance, direct control over their data.
But I bet cloud is growing faster.
You guessed it. Cloud deployment is the fastest growing segment, fueled by that general shift to cloud services we talked about, plus the rise of remote work making cloud access more important.
Makes sense. What about components? Hardware versus software versus services?
Hardware currently dominates the share, mostly because people value the reliability and performance you get from a dedicated physical appliance.
Right.
But the fastest growing component segment is professional services. Things like installation, integration, support, maintenance.
Because the solutions are getting more complex.
Exactly. As these backup systems get more sophisticated, companies need more expert help to set them up and keep them running smoothly.
Okay. How about the systems themselves? Open versus integrated.
In terms of system types, open systems currently have the largest share. That's mainly due to their flexibility and compatibility. They can often work with a wider range of existing IT stuff.
Oh, there's always a but.
But integrated systems, those all-in-one similar boxes, are the fastest growing, driven by companies who just want something straightforward, easier to manage.
Simplicity sells. Okay, what about company size? Big enterprises versus SMEs.
Large enterprises are definitely the dominant segment right now. They just have massive amounts of data and often face stricter regulations, so they invest heavily in backup.
And the fastest growing, let me guess, SMEs.
Bingo! Small and medium-sized enterprises are the fastest growing customer segment. They're increasingly realizing data security isn't just a big company problem, and they're adopting more cost-effective, scalable PBBA solutions.
Good to see them catching on. Lastly, any interesting splits by industry vertical?
Oh yeah, definitely. The BFSI sector, banking, financial services, insurance, holds a really substantial market share.
Not surprising, given the sensitivity of their data and regulation.
Exactly. Critical data protection needs heavy compliance burden, but the fastest growing vertical is actually healthcare.
Healthcare. Why the rapid growth there?
Think about patient data privacy concerns, APAC and similar regulations, plus just the sheer volume of sensitive medical records, images, research data being generated, and of course the absolute need for business continuity in hospitals and clinics.
Yeah, you can't have healthcare systems down. Okay, so pulling it all together seems like a pretty dynamic and healthy market overall.
Definitely. To recap the big numbers, global market projected to grow at that strong 10.90% CAGR between 2025 and 2033.
Driven heavily by sectors like BFSI needing top-notch security.
Right. And while large enterprises are the biggest chunk today, SMEs are where the fastest adoption is happening.
So a very thorough overview. What are the key takeaways then for you, our listener, from all this data?
Well, I think if you're involved in managing data for your organization, and who isn't these days, this really gives you context. Understanding these growth trends, seeing how regions like APAC are surging.
Yeah, and knowing the drivers like cloud, hybrid IT, and security awareness.
Right. It helps you make smarter decisions about your own backup and recovery strategy. That huge growth in APAC might signal opportunities or maybe supply chain things to watch depending on your footprint.
And that intense focus on ransomware protection, that clearly shows where vendors are putting their R&D efforts and maybe where you should be focusing your defenses too.
It also highlights, I think, that you need to stay informed, not just about the tech, but also about those bigger economic factors like the trade tariffs we discussed. They can really impact the cost and availability of these essential tools.
Absolutely.
So, as we watch cyber threats keep evolving and data rules get even tighter, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How is that balance between on-premise and cloud backup going to keep shifting?
Good question.
And what kind of new tricks, what innovations will we see packed into these purpose-built appliances next to tackle those future challenges? It's definitely something worth mulling over as you think about protecting your own crucial data.
Indeed it is. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the purpose-built backup appliance market.
Yeah, thanks for exploring this really critical topic with us.